So I looked at them, and I'm so obsessed with getting those lines straight that it took me a little while to make sure those lines were perfect. By that time, the people from Morocco, they don't love their picture taken, and I just didn't want to make her unhappy, but they look away, which is what happened there. And I felt badly because I thought, I'm more interested in the lines than the people right here. And the pocketbooks that weren't really $3,000, I think there were 3. But I thought, you know, I'm getting obsessed with this. I need to just take pictures for fun and relax, which is sometimes what you have to do. And sometimes, again, there's not too much to go on. This pole, I had to move the whole pole because it was really very askew, but I got that straight in Photoshop. These things weren't here. I took reflections. I think there was 1 or 2 chairs, and then it ended, so I put the rest of the chairs there. You have to do a little bit of Photoshop sometimes just to make, I mean, 1 chair can be 1,000 chairs, right? So I can't draw a chair, but I certainly can copy a chair and then just add to the, it just ended there. It looked silly, and this part was here, so I put it over there. But again, there wasn't much to go on to keep it kind of the lines vertical, but you can pretty much tell after a while. And then sometimes lines are tapered, like in the Boston Public Library. You've probably all been there or photographed there. It's a great place to photograph, but you know, if you're up close, those lines don't seem to be just right, so you can go to the next one there. And actually, I'm going to do this myself just for 1 second. And then the next one, same thing. Once you get close, those lines are off. And then there. And I happen to like the architecture of this. I like the, the top part there. I like the brickwork there. It's kind of that brickwork that goes back and forth. And when I went to Florence, I saw something almost the same kind of columns, the same herringbone, I think they call it. Same architecture up the top, and there was a, you know, I also have to be careful on who is there. I like people in my pictures, and at first a woman with a dog came along, and I thought, well, that just doesn't fit in. And then a man pushing a baby carriage with 2 children, I thought, well, that doesn't fit in. But I waited a few more minutes, and a nun came along, and this is a little abbey. I thought it worked pretty well. So I took that lady, and I brought her to the Boston Public Library. And she was, I mean, at the time I'm saying to her, can I take your picture? And she, you know, she probably thought, are you giving, she thought I was giving money to the church. I don't know, she just nodded. She didn't speak English, I didn't speak Italian. This lady probably never knew she'd make it to America. But I had to take the shadow, because if you go back, just one back, if you would please. You'll see the shadow was on the left side, and then I switched her around for the next one. And then the shadow, I had to put the shadow over there. So there are some things you have to do, but it makes the picture more interesting. I'm always very careful when I do this. I do this for fun. If I'm doing silly things like that, I have to be pretty careful not to, you know, I would never give this to the Boston Public Library as reality. You have to always tell them the truth. Okay. Now, straight vertical lines. Of course, it's best if they're taken straight to begin with, but they can be adjusted in Photoshop. And so I was in Las Vegas, and I saw this window that I thought was kind of nice, kind of a window door type thing with the drapes on it and the nice stairway. So I decided to, so I took another picture, and a little boy was coming along. Actually, this is the fixed picture, because I didn't move it. I was just a snapshot. I didn't even have a camera. I mean, I didn't even have a tripod with me. I didn't have a cable release or anything. It was just a snapshot. It was for fun. But I couldn't stand the lines. I had to change that, so I brought them back in Photoshop. I was going to show you in Photoshop. We're going to be a little bit more pressed for time than I realized, so I think I'll just tell you rather than showing you. If you go to, first of all, you have to double your image, so you have 2 layers of the same thing, which I'm sure you understand that. The top layer, if you do Command or Control T, which is transformation, if you do Command or Control T, then it gives you all kinds of little wings to pull. And if you put, you'll find it. It says distort or skew, and then you can move the lines the way you want them to, the way that you do want them to go. Again, it's better to take them 95% perfect at the beginning and change them 2 or 3% if you have to. Try to shoot for 100. Sometimes you get home and you think, oh my gosh, that was off on one side. But always fix them. It just looks so much more professional. Again, this wasn't for a job, but it just looks better. Same thing in Las Vegas, these lines, but you can fix them perfectly. I'm not sure why all of my shots in Las Vegas look so bad, but I don't know. This is MIT. It wasn't an assignment either. But if you have something like this, you have to be careful, because when you straighten it out, which will be the next one, you lose some of that beautiful cherry wood that was on the side. So if you're taking something and you're not taking it straight, sometimes you know it's not straight. There's not much you can do about it. You don't have the right lens with you. You can't get up on a ladder. You can't get up on it to any elevation. And you're taking it and it's not straight. You know you're going to be fixing it later. Always take a little more on the sides, because you know that you will lose some of it as you do it. Okay, this is the place we have down the Cape, and there were no permanent lines there. The only one was the one in the corner. But you can go by furniture if you have to. You have nothing else to go by. You can find some permanent some furniture, or again, you can use drapes and so forth, curtains there, but that's not always the best way to do it. Even if you're on a hill of some kind, again, it's to the earth, not the floor, not the ground, not whatever. It might not be quite. Sometimes the floors are even tipsy. You just want to be sure that it's straight. And when you come back, you don't want the walkway or the street to be perfect. You just want the lines to be lined up. So that's what you concentrate on. Same thing in Boston here. Acon Street. Again, you're worried about the permanent parts of the buildings, interior or exterior. Okay. Again, I'm up high in Venice, looking down over these little rooftops here. And again, you're just worried about whether you're high or low. It's harder when you're high, harder when you're low. Again, take more than you need, because you can always change it in Photoshop if you don't have a tilt and shift lens. We'll talk about lenses later. Sometimes, this is Venice, and gee, I had it straight on the left side and the right side wasn't straight, so then I got it straight on the right side, and then I thought, oh yeah, these buildings were built in the 1400s. I'm not going to worry about it. And you just enjoy the show then, because very often older buildings do have a little problem with bum lines. And another one you don't worry about is the Stata Center, because, I mean, you could show this upside down and people would say, oh yes, I've been there. And one more. And that's part of MIT, yes. Heard someone say, where's that? And then the same thing here. Again, I do see that I wanted these straight, the windows, but really, if it's off, I've seen many pictures in my camera club, and they're kind of tilted. The judges don't even notice, because there's so much else to look at. Okay. So rule number 2 is keep the integrity of the space with your lighting. In other words, what you see, not in a dark room like this, but in most rooms, you keep their lighting as is. You don't want to reinvent all of their lighting. Most commercial space, they have found, they've spent quite a bit of money on getting it. They found what they wanted for lighting. They set the lighting up. They spent a lot of money. They don't want you to come along and change their lighting by throwing up some lights and umbrellas or softboxes or whatever. They want to see what they have shown, or what's open to the public, whether it's a restaurant or a candy store. Again, any place that's commercial, a doctor's office, a school, the lighting that they present to you is the lighting that you present back to them. In other words, make the exposure look the way you have seen it. And this is the Hotel Marlowe. So the Hotel Marlowe, that's what their lighting looked like. Maybe a little brighter than that, but so that's what I wanted to present to them. And so I did HDR. Even if you light it, you can still make it look just like you have seen it yourself. And present it. And that's what they want to see. They don't want to see anything that doesn't look like what they've created. Okay. Clemens Place, I did that for some company down in I don't know, Hartford, Connecticut, and that's what I saw, so that's what I presented. Morocco, this is what I saw. Now, would I like to have lightened that up in Photoshop? Well, it's already a lot lighter. It's a lot lighter on my laptop, but it still is not. The whole thing's not lighted. So in Photoshop, for fun, I would like to lighten, but that's not really what I saw. So I do try to keep the integrity of the lighting that I have seen. Another room in the Hotel Marlowe. Lots of little lights hidden everywhere, kind of like my pepper lights. They all went off at once. And that's what I presented to them. Now, the Peacefield in the John Hancock's home in Quincy, John Quincy Adams. I did some work for Mass Office of Tourism. I did a little work for them, and then they sent me to some of these places. This is what their lighting looked like. Did I want to put a pepper light there or a light of some kind? Yes, I did, but I didn't want to change this is obviously what they did many years ago without lighting, so that's the way I presented it. So decorate and compose. You know, you have to be a little bit of a decorator when you do this. I end up putting all kinds of things. I add flowers, I bring plants. You can add other items of interest. You set, actually I said set any table. You set all tables if they've ever eaten there, anyone's ever eaten there before. You work for good composition. I bring flowers with me, and just artificial flowers, some nice silk flowers. In fact, you can see the same silk flowers in lots of pictures sometimes. But, you know, there are thousands of venues for them, so it just adds something, and plants add something too. So we did this for some builder in Gloucester. The beautiful ocean was behind it, and there was nothing else here. And as for the builder, in Camera Club, they would not like this because we've cut something off. It's almost a merger. In architectural photography, it's a little different. They just want you to tell a story. They know that's a bed. Now we've identified the room. It's a bedroom because there's a bed there. Now the builder just wants to show what the windows look like with a little bit of warmth. Below, outside the window, they were doing some construction on something. So we always get the permission from the homeowners, and we say to them, is there some way we can, you know, get some plants? Or they said, move anything around you want. In my car, I always have my backup stuff, but we didn't need to. My assistant found that in another room. And then I thought, well, that looks kind of lonesome. Let's bring a chair. So then I thought, well, now the chair needs a table. We rearranged the whole house. But it kind of shows, and it shows nicely, and it most of all blocked off that, that ugly thing outside, even though the top part of the view was nice. And plants and flowers add such a nice warmth to any space, so it's always nice to have some kind of greenery around. So the first thing I walked into Ethan Allo, and they have a light right inside of a window. That's kind of an odd thing to have a light in a window, but it looked nice. So I said to them, and you don't say this to Ethan Allen, I said, could I just do a little redecorating? You don't say that to Ethan Allen, the decorators of the world. But they said, well, yeah, like what did you want to do? And I said, well, it needs a light there. You can't really tell that here, but it's lighted on this side. There was plenty of light there, so we needed another light over there just to balance the light. And I always try to take it their way first and then my way and present them with both. I figured, you know, who am I to change everything, but just a few little changes, and they very often use the one that I've done later on. I've done some work on because I just knew it needed some light up there. And then flowers. So I had to do some work for a kitchen store, and you can go to the next one, you'll see the same flowers. And I did 8 rooms, and you'll see, unfortunately, it was the year, you can go to the next one. This was the year, I only had one set of flowers with me, and we had 8 rooms, so I said after the 3rd room, okay, to my assistant, you need to go out and get some flowers. Now I'm not buying silk flowers, we're buying fresh flowers, 2 or 3 different, you know, kinds. They gave us enough money, then they ended up paying for the flowers, but it's always nice to bring flowers with you, and then you don't, you know, okay, sorry. This was also in Vegas. This was for Todd English from Boston here. He has a place in Vegas, and I'd done some work for him. I thought, well, I'll just take a picture while I'm out here. It's not an assignment, but we went there for dinner, and then afterwards I said, gee, can I take some pictures without the people? They said, come early in the morning. So we went early in the morning, and then the tables weren't set or anything. If you look at that, that's kind of like a junior high school, you know, table, isn't it? In the cafeteria. So I asked them to set the tables, and they did, and it just looked a little bit nicer. Set all tables, any place anybody has ever eaten before, you set the table. Okay, and I just did this last week for a shot down the Cape for some magazine, and I brought a few things with me, but the homeowner had just black placemats, just simple dishes, and we did bring some fruit and some vegetables and put them on a little cutting board, a couple of apples back there. Sometimes you don't have to be really fancy, you don't have to know a lot. You get better at it as you're doing, but sometimes, especially if the room is busy, you want simple things. And this room had a lot going on in some of the other pictures, so we'll just go through those, which are next. And the same thing there, just put them in a row, a little bit of vegetables. We brought some boxes, and one more. And then we put a table, there was a table in the background with, they wanted the windows blown out. That's what they liked down. And editorial work, again, is very different than Camera Club work. They like the windows blown out. Mostly all editorial people say to me, make sure you blow out the windows. So we do. That's what because they think then you'll get the concentration here, which on my screen there is good concentration here. It is difficult to see. But again, we just set the table with just some simple things. We could have put glasses and silverware and all that, but it just isn't what we wanted to do. This I took up in Maine, and we did the upstairs first, and then we came downstairs. There was a plain table with absolutely nothing on it, and they said, this is our wine cellar, would like a picture of this. And the owner wasn't there to tell me what to do, what he wanted. So I said to the guys, well, do people ever eat here? And they say, not too often. Yeah, once in a while they'll have a little conference going on, and we bring a little food down. I said, then let's set the table. They were very unhappy they gave me that for an answer. So I said, well, let's get some dishes. And they kind of looked at each other like, okay. So they came back with like 6 dishes. I said, now let's double it. Let's bring 12 dishes. So I went back up, brought the dishes, and I said, do you have any napkins in the house? It's a huge restaurant. They went back and got the napkins. Could they have brought silverware? Oh, no. I asked for napkins. I sent them up for silverware. By the time I got to the candles, I thought they were going to wrap them around my neck. But you know what? Doesn't it look nicer with the table set? So, of course, I gave the owner the unset table. You always want to give them before you do your artwork. And then I gave them the set table. And guess what went on their website? Of course, this one. And he said, Sarah, we get a lot more business now, little meetings and stuff like that. And they ask for food, which is great for them rather than a little conference. So you start using a little ingenuity. And again, always present them with both, because maybe they have an agenda that you're not familiar with. Okay. And I also did this last summer for a magazine down the Cape. And after I did this whole room, and it was, what's it called? Home remodeling for Cape Cod and the islands, I realized that this was down so quickly. If you go to the next one, you'll notice that little melon just pops right up. So sometimes in Photoshop, I just grab this one here, put it over here, because you wouldn't want that in a magazine. You have to kind of watch for little, I'm sorry, am I in your way? Okay. So you kind of want to watch for little things like that, because they will find that someone will pick right up on that. So you have to do a little bit of Photoshop work, and boy, once you get used to that, you can do that in 2 seconds. It's nothing at all. So the next one, and then I think they ended up using this one on the website or something. Okay. And then this was also, it was just the whole home we did actually. And fires and fireplaces, I always put fires in. This was the middle of the summer last year. There was no way I was lighting a fire. It's easy. It takes me about, 15 seconds to put a fire in a fireplace in Photoshop. It takes about 15 minutes, and it's hot, 900 degrees there with the fire going, so I just put it. They say, oh, do you want us to light the fire? I said, I'll take care of that. And they don't, and they always use it with a fire. So actually this one they didn't, I don't think. And the bathroom. Okay, lenses. The most common lens for architecture is probably about a 24 millimeter. And then sometimes for very small areas you have to use an 11 or a 12. A Nikon I think has a 12. An 11 I have a 12. It's a Tamron or something, Sigma. I find that the wider the fewer millimeters it has, like an 11 or 12, it makes the picture look a little distorted. And I did some work down for the Belfry down in Sandwich, down in Cape Cod one time, and I had just kind of started, probably only done 5 or 6 jobs before then, and I came in and there was a room probably the size of this room here, and it was the dining room, and we did all the upstairs before, myself and my assistant. And then he said, do you think you'll get a picture of the dining room too? And I said, yes. So I picked up my 24 millimeter, and I didn't get the whole thing, and I thought, well, let's just go to my 18 millimeter. And I thought, that's not even big enough. He wants the whole thing. So I used my 11 millimeter, 12, whatever I have, and the room looked huge, and I gave him the picture, and that was the end of it. And year after year after year, for about 5 years, every single magazine on Cape Cod had that image of the Belfry down there. He just loved that image, and it was in the 5 or 6 magazines that are down there month after month. You couldn't open the magazine without seeing that Belfry dining room. So one time I went back, they wanted some more pictures taken of something else. So I went into the room and I went, oh, did you remodel? The room looked tiny to me, and I had just gotten so used to that picture that he said, oh, Sarah, I love this picture. It brings in tons of business. They want bar mitzvahs and weddings here. And he said, and I just bring them to another place. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've really done a disservice to these people. So now I try to go with my 24. Our eyes see at about 55 millimeters. You can even do, you can put them together, stitch is better than using a very wide angle lens. Unless you're in a bathroom and you can't do it, I don't usually use anything. I seldom use my 11 millimeter. Even the Boston Public Library, that space doesn't look that big, and sometimes it seems to work. But again, you have to be careful if it's a customer. You don't always want, well, he loved the fact that it was distorted, but it looked very normal, but I'm always careful about that now. And a bathroom down the Capes, the new thing in the Capes is they're taking the bathtubs and turning them to nice big showers. But in using the wide-angle lens, because the bathroom was about the size of this space right here, you know, the door got wider. We had to change that and make the door smaller. We had to do a lot of work. Yes, it showed the shower they wanted to show. Even the toilet paper, look how distorted that is. You have to be kind of careful when you're using those wide-angle lenses. I took this at the Hotel Marlowe. You can see one problem you have is mirrors. And actually my tripod was right here. Cable released to my arm, and I just left this in for you people to see that my arm had to come out here because cameras just don't float and go away. When there are mirrors, it shows. So I had to Photoshop. Unfortunately, there wasn't one mirror. There's a mirror on both sides, so I was Photoshopping mirror after mirror after mirror. I had to put it right in the middle, and then I got home and realized that. I happen to like when there's some kind of lights coming in, some reflections from outside. We were up very high, and this company doesn't, again, we love beautiful skies in camera clubs. That's the first thing we worry about is a nice sky. These people don't care about that stuff. They just want to be sure that these lines are straight, reflections look nice, that the rooms look presentable. Now, lighting a space is two ways. One is with umbrellas and strobes, and the other one's with HDR. Years ago, when I talked about HDR, people would look at me like, what? Now, how many people here know what HDR is? Right, so most everybody does, and that's the way probably I do. Maybe 70% of my work now is with HDR. But if you don't have HDR and you don't know how to learn HDR, you don't know too much about it, we'll show you how to light it. Sometimes it's better to light it. If it's very glary outside, it's better to light it with your lighting rather than doing HDR because it's too contrasty. Yes?
What is HDR?
We're going to go into that afterwards, but it's high dynamic range. We'll talk a lot about that after I talk about regular lighting. Yep. So if you're lighting the space with studio strobes, we use umbrellas and softboxes. I'm sorry, umbrellas and I usually use just two studio strobes. Even the Taj Mahal, I think you could really light with two big strobes really carry the light a long way because they don't just go straight. They bounce on the ceiling, they bounce on the wall, and the whole room is lighted with just two. And this is the way I set it up. So I first go into a room and say, okay, what do I want? What's important here? I'd say, okay, there's a grand piano here, or let's say the grand piano is down there. There's a grand piano, and I love that window over there, and this is nice. And I look around, I say, okay, that's my focal point. You know when you're taking a picture for a camera club or for yourself, you think about a focal point. Well, rooms, you have focal points too. So you want to be sure to get whatever you like, maybe even in the placement of a third in or something. Get everything in, you find your final position, and then my assistant knows she puts lights on both sides. She puts one stand with one studio strobe and an umbrella there, and the same thing, one on the other side. If I move my whole position to way over there, she still puts one strobe over here and one strobe over there, and they're lighting straight. There are other ways to do it, but that seems to work out best for me. And I finished a lecture one time and I was talking all about studio strobes, and at the end one man said, what are these studio strobes? So I took a picture of them. They're just, there are all kinds of, there aren't even any bad lights. I'm sure there are bad lights out there, but you don't need to spend $1 million on lights. All these things, I'm so untechnical. I took one look at that and thought, I will never figure this out. Within 3 minutes, I figured it all out. One of those buttons makes the sound go off. It means your lighting is ready. How hard is that? One of them is just for the model light over here. One of them is an on-off button. I like those. One of them is just to put your model light, one's the regular light, and there are two sliders on the top. If you pull it all the way to the right, it's bright. If you pull it all the way to the left, it's dark, and you can move them incrementally. It's very easy, very intuitive to figure out, and there's a thing called a slave on there. If you don't want to use radio slaves, it means if any light in the room has gone off, then that light will go off too. So it's pretty easy. If you had 16 lights in the room, theoretically, if it's in the same room, you only need one light that goes off that could be connected to your camera. There are lots of other ways of doing it. Now I use radio slaves, but there are lots of ways of doing it. It isn't difficult, trust me. And then I just put an umbrella to the end of the whole thing. I do have a radio slave there. And then that's one of the setup that's there. One setup here, take some meter readings, and I'm golden. Okay, softboxes. Someone said, well, why don't you use softboxes? Aren't those better? Softboxes direct the light. If you are taking portraits, softboxes are perfect. They wrap around the people if you get nice and closer. I love softboxes and I use them all the time, but not for architectural photography. Unless you really want to emphasize one thing and let the rest go darker, but mostly you want to light your room the way it's lighted so you get some meter readings. I always bring it a little bit down from whatever the meter readings are because I want I want their lighting to show through. I'm just giving a hint of light so that their light shows, and I'm filling in the dark spaces in the shadows. And here, I just I stood and faced the fireplace, put a light on one side, a light on the other side, and once again just took some meter readings. And sometimes once in a while see my pepper light. But in Photoshop they're only this big, so you just get them right out. But we probably put a pepper light on the ground next to me as I'm over here on the ground, because again the lower things don't seem. If your lights are up here, the lower things aren't necessarily going to see the lights quite as well. So that's where you put your pepper lights.